So, welcome to the Real Estate Life podcast. So, on this podcast, we are dedicated to creating a life of passive income through real estate and doing the things that we love along the way. Today on the show, we have a very special guest, Christian Bruno. He is a transactional practicing attorney in the areas of real estate finance, and general corporate and business law. Christian handles all aspects of commercial real estate and finance, but he's got some special nuggets to talk about multifamilies today. Very excited to hear about a deal and the way he structured a deal. We'll get into it. But Christian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Abiel. Pleasure to speak with you again.
Yeah. Christian, so I want the listeners to get a quick background of what you do and how you got into law. Just kind of give us a little background about that.
Yeah, so I've been an attorney for over 20 years, and I've been specializing primarily in the areas of real estate and real estate finance for over 15 years. I started my career in Philadelphia, actually doing a lot of real estate lender representation for large real estate investment trusts and financial institutions. And when I moved down to Miami, I eventually migrated towards being on the borrower and the developer side, representing a lot of clients such as yourself who invest in multifamily in particular, but also in other asset classes such as hospitality, retail, office. But the primary area that I've worked in over the last 15 years has definitely been multifamily. Probably been involved in well over 100 transactions, and if you include all the refinances, easily over 200.
Now, for those in the business, that's a lot. And when you participate on the finance side, you get to see another aspect of the deal. A lot of buyers and sellers don't get to see the back door,
right?
What it is to work with a lender directly, and what they look at and how they underwrite deals. So,
that's right.
For an investor that wants to get into real estate investing, and for those that are already involved in multifamilies investing, when should they contact an attorney like you? Because I see, I won't say I see, I've made those mistakes in the past that by the time I reach out to an attorney for advice, it might be too late. So what suggestion do you give investors?
Yeah, definitely. That's very common, especially early on in the life cycle of a particular company or group. Definitely before you enter into a contract, you should definitely contact an attorney and discuss the deal and really engage an attorney to negotiate the contract, because really the purchase contract is the roadmap for the entire deal. You're going to have a diligence period where you can cancel the contract, but a seller never really likes to retrade a deal during a diligence period if there's already been a handshake, terms agreed upon on a handshake or on a letter of credit. The most practical way of approaching a deal between a buyer and a seller is through an LOI, which is non-binding. And so many sophisticated investors such as yourself, who's been doing this a long time, you can handle a letter of intent on your own, but just like retrading the deal during the diligence period, it kind of looks a little bad if you try to retrade a deal after signing a non-binding letter of intent. So typically what I see is our clients come to us when they're in the negotiation stages of an LOI. Even though it is non-binding, that's usually when most of our clients reach out to us, certainly before purchase contract.
The non-binding LOI is exactly, I just want to emphasize on that, non-binding. There's a lot of investors that come into the business and they think that LOI is going to bind the deal together.
Right.
And, I've been in those transactions where that binding, just that LOI didn't help out. Somebody else comes in, could take the deal from you. I am definitely
So that's a great point. And one of the things that we do with our LOIs is that there is a binding aspect of an LOI that is exclusivity. So when you sign the LOI, you have the seller obligate themselves to not talk to anybody for whatever it is, 10, 20 days, whatever gives you comfort sufficient to get to a purchase agreement.
You know what? That's interesting. I've never heard that one. You just taught me on that one.
Yeah, at our, for our clients, for the deals that we do, that's pretty standard, is even though the LOI is, there's no obligation with respect to how the deal for the purchase of the apartment building is going to go, the exclusivity of it is binding. And that is, you could, in theory, go after someone who has violated an exclusivity provision. Now, some sellers, they might not be willing to give it.
Of course.
But generally speaking, if you want to keep the ball rolling, they will give it if they want to, if they think you're the right buyer for their property.
Yeah. Now, let's just to be real, there is a lot of attorneys, and it's a very competitive market in your industry. Right. And what I found is that building the relationship with your attorney is just as important as a partnership that you would do a joint venture deal on a property. And it's a relationship that attorneys and investors need to build over time, because you kind of learn how to work with each other. You see their habits, you kind of learn their business. Sometimes as an investor, as an attorney, it takes a while for them to really understand the things that really are important to you as an investor. Right.
Absolutely.
And that takes time with relationships. So I always, me personally, I don't like to jump around from attorney and find. I like to build that relationship, because it takes time for you to understand, you know what, Abiel, I kind of know what you like, your pitfalls, and you got a pitfall coming here. I know that your deals that you like to look at are like this. You got to be careful with this. And that comes through a relationship. So, my advice to listeners is to, give it some time, don't make it just a one deal, build that relationship over and over. And that's really helped me out in my career. It's a decision that we've made recently. Just let's figure this out with this attorney. Let's hash it out, and we'll start growing a relationship and get to know our habits.
Right.
During the selling and buying of a real estate asset, there's a lot of mistakes, and there's a lot of ways too that an investor could save or lose a lot of money. What are the most common pitfalls that you see investors make in a transaction?
Well, I mean, as far as saving money goes, that's pretty standard across the board here in Florida, where you can have, if you have an attorney who is also a title agent, you can kill two birds with one stone, save some, and if you control title in the deal, you can save money that you would have otherwise not, that you would have spent on a third-party title agent. So that's Florida real estate transactions 101. So that's certainly something you can discuss with an attorney. What sort of arrangement can you make, and in almost every circumstance, your attorney is going to work with you on that, depending upon the size of the deal, et cetera. The other one is, with any refinance of a property, Florida has very unique mortgage taxes, and they, and a lot of those mortgage taxes can be easily, in most cases, avoided on a straight refinance, not on a purchase finance, but on a refinance. You really shouldn't be paying mortgage taxes for no reason on a straight up refinance up to the amount that you're of the debt that you're taking out. That is generally exempt, but that's something that you need an attorney to modify the loan documentation, et cetera, so that you can save that money. But I've had investors come, from New York, California, other states. They had no idea about that, and they almost went forward on a refinance of an apartment building that was one of 100, properties in a portfolio, and they were about to, pay an extra $150,000 in mortgage taxes that they really didn't need to at all.
Yeah, that's a good advice. That's why you got to work with the guys that have experience locally in the state. I agree with you on that one. Is there something that you see in investors overlook in a transaction where they could find themselves with a big liability? Is there any one or two items that you could point out to us that things that we should look out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think for somebody who's getting into this for the first time with respect to how much liability they may be exposing themselves to, the most basic one is to form an SPE for every single investment that you have. It sounds very straightforward, and maybe it's very basic for a lot of people, but you'd be surprised how many times I see a deal come in where it might be owned by an individual, or it might be owned by a company, a company who they happen to own real estate, or somewhere down the line, one of the principals just put an apartment building in the name of the company that is an ongoing entity worth millions of dollars. And we actually had that situation last year. And so, for a whole host of reasons, you want to avail yourselves of the limited liability laws in the state of Florida and form an LLC, or in some cases, some other variation of an LLC for every single investment you make. And that's going to protect you to a large degree. The other one that I often see, particularly for starter deals, is when you're going out there and you're raising money. And you have to be careful when you raise money that if you don't have commitments from friends and family or business partners who you've done dealings with before, who are in the deal on day one, you could be subjecting yourselves to securities law, which is separate and apart from real estate law. I participate in some of the securities laws, and we have a corporate department that handles the bulk of those. But you definitely want to make sure that if you are out there asking for money, that you comply with the appropriate securities laws and do the disclosures and have the paperwork. Otherwise, you could have significant exposure vis-a-vis your partners if the deal goes bad.
I mean, Christian, that last advice, people take for granted. Right. I could say I can't say percentages, but most deals get raised without anyone considering those securities laws until reality hits them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's all fine if you look at if a deal turns out great and everybody's making money and getting their distributions, then nobody's going to bat an eye. But it's that one bad deal that happens because of COVID or because of a tornado or whatever, that it just takes that one deal and a relationship that can go sour. And they go see a lawyer and they say, well, where's the offering documents that you signed when you gave them the money? And they're like, what offering? And so I mean, it can be cumbersome, but it can be painful, especially on the first one. But once you've gone through that first one, then you can always repeat that and use that as a template going forward, assuming you have the same type of structure and you're using the same.
To put together one of those offering memorandums, it is a task, especially if you're operating, you're raising money. It is a challenge for syndicators and investors to put all that together. Right. And I'd say that from my own personal experience, that it is a team effort. So I agree. And it discourages a lot of investors because of that. And I see investors, they don't ask, they don't ask their investors, where are they financially? What type of investors are they? Are they accredited? No one asks that, because those are really key factors, man. So I want listeners to really, really pay attention to that, because that is really good advice, and it's taken for granted a lot. Christian, I know we were talking about a deal, and you just gave me a quick little rundown about that deal, but immediately I loved the way that deal was structured, because I found it very creative, and I wouldn't mind if I had structured some of my deals that way, because it just makes it makes the seller, one of the things that happens a lot as a buyer, I'm buying deals all the time, is, I'm not going to say all sellers are liars, but you buy these deals and you think there's a certain percentage of units that are producing or making money or renting. And then when you get into the deal and you close, you lose 20-30% of your tenants. You're like, what happened here? How did this happen? And give us a little bit of how you created. Tell us about this deal.
Yeah. So it was a multifamily complex deal. So it was more than one building. And it was a significant amount of money, but there was a long time period between the time the purchase contract was signed and when closing was set to occur. It took, diligence was going to take 90 days and whatnot, just generally because it was a lot of property. It was a big property. And during that diligence phase, COVID hit, and there was, significant concern. So in order for the deal to go forward, there were lease up requirements that were imposed in order to close the deal. And it was difficult to estimate, but basically, we had to match the percentage of tenants that were going to be in place in order to make the deal work. And a lot of that was also driven by the lender requirements.
Was it Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac on that?
It was Freddie Mac on that one.
Freddie Mac. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we had to make sure that we hit those numbers in order to close. Well, circle towards, we get past diligence and we approach the closing date, and the lease up requirement just wasn't there. They weren't quite there. And, the buyer could have walked away, but, fortunately, cooler heads prevailed amongst the buyer, the seller, and the lender, et cetera. I mean, there was a lot of back and forth and lawyering going on and that sort of thing. But ultimately, what we did in order for the deal to move forward was create a holdback structure, so that a portion of the purchase price was set aside in order to fill the gap of the lease up requirements that had not yet been met. The lender was on board.
Love that. I love that.
So a portion of the purchase price was held back, and then if those apartments, COVID came around and those apartments were then leased up, then by a date certain, and there were different tranches, then a certain amount would be released to the seller. But if they weren't, then they go back to the buyers, essentially a reduction on the purchase.
That's a great structure, man, because it motivates. I mean, basically, the seller's doing a lot of this work for you. They're doing that you would have to do anyways after you close.
Right, because you had a development, the development seller, who they had created the property and they had been running it, but they were ready to sell it to an institutional, a private equity investor. It wasn't really institutional, but a private equity fund that was paying the premium dollars and essentially for a turnkey property leased up.
Correct.
They weren't getting what they paid for. So, we had to modify it so that effectively they would.
That is a sweet deal. That's a good structure. I like that one. And that is for more of a stable product. It's not a distressed property. It's just the seller wanted to sell, but he just wasn't there yet. And COVID put a hiccup on his business plan, but he still found a buyer. Was there any mistakes on that transactions that you said that could have probably made it a little bit smoother, that someone could learn how to do this and not make the same mistakes?
Well, on that particular transaction, I think that we were able to identify the issue early on prior to the end of diligence, so that we were able to modify. Not really a mistake, but just kind of the circumstance in which we were in. So I think that, initially, the challenge was initially the seller and their attorney kind of overreacted a bit. And, we were just able to, calmly depersonalize it, which a lot of what we do as attorneys is to depersonalize, the emotion of the investment. We're a little bit separated from the emotion of it, and we depersonalized it, and just objectively we're able to explain to the attorney, who then passed it on to the seller, that we can, we're willing to work with them and, move forward. So maybe the mistake was a little overreaction initially, a little bit of, people were upset, but
I like that you mentioned that depersonalized, because a lot of times buyers and sellers, they have huge egos. So that gets in the way of a transaction. And, there's been many times that I want to talk directly to the seller or to the buyer. Let me talk to him. Sometimes that's not the best thing.
No, that's usually the worst time.
So, I've been in that position. I'm like, okay, I think I can just resolve this myself. And then when you end up doing this, you might make the situation worse. Let the experts be the filter, let them do their thing. And it usually prevails. So I agree with you that depersonalized, that's definitely very important when a good attorney does that for their client. That's a really important part of their role.
Yeah.
Christian, I mean, you gave us great information here. I always like to end the show with a question, and I love it because it's always different with everyone and every different type of business. And it's what is I know you gave us advice, but I also want to know, what does financial freedom mean to you?
Yeah, that is an interesting question, and it is different for everybody. But for me, it's being able to do what you love for a living. And I've been doing this 20 years now, and I'm fortunate enough to to do something that I love and that I enjoy during the time, and it doesn't affect how I live my life. Being able to do the things that I like to do outside of work, traveling, spending time with family, get a little golf in there, so for me, that's financial freedom,
Yeah,
but
that's enough. That's awesome, man.
That's a hell of a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, you've been at it 20 years, so you definitely look like you love what you're doing.
I do. Very,
Yeah.
very, very fortunate. Very fortunate.
Christian, how can the listeners reach out to you? Can you give them your information? And I'll also drop it in a link, but I would like to hear
Sure.
from you.
Sure. They can reach out to me at cbruno@cozen.com, COZEN, or they can just Google me at Cozen Christian Bruno, and I'll pop up. I'll be the first one to pop up, and all my contact information is on the website.
Yeah. And I'll leave that for the folks. I'll put the link in. Christian, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, man. It was great information you gave us.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.